You're listening to the Two Guys Talking Podcast Network.
All of us who are podcasters get in front of microphones and bloviate. We talk until we can talk no more with friends, family, cohorts, sometimes enemies, but more often than not, someone that you have a long-lasting relationship with. You know, one thing holds true throughout all of it. All hosts die, but your show lives on. We're going to talk about a lot inside this episode. And more importantly, Brian and I want your insight on this episode of the Podcast Gauntlet. Greetings, everybody. I'm Mike Wilkerson, one of your hosts.
And I'm Brian Ensminger, the other one of your hosts.
Brian, death doesn't touch me often inside of podcasting. And recently, one of my previous hosts, Dr. Michael Lynch from the conspiracyagents.com program, died unexpectedly from a massive... I'm not entirely sure how the doc could do anything small. So he died from a massive heart attack, just suddenly out of the blue. And for those that didn't know Dr. Lynch was the, I can't really say creative force, because everything that he talked about was fact without question for him. And his ability to take facts of conspiracy that he had either discovered or founded or somehow had ended up inside of his trunk of awesome as he delivered content with me during the conspiracyagents.com program is legend. I've never seen anybody who is able to make a giant plate of spaghetti that is indiscernible to anybody else but him be talked about, and then suddenly it just starts to emit light bulb moments. And while I did not agree with everything that the doc said, the doc always said something that made me think, which is frankly why all the podcasts that I do, especially the long-lasting ones, not unlike ours, Brian, the reason I engage in them is because I may not agree with everything that's said inside the program or what my hosts are talking about. But when the program or my hosts make me think, that fuels me, and it continues to fuel me. And it's why when I think of the doc, I really don't get sad at all, mostly because I know that in addition to all of the memories that I have of him, all the memories of the people that met Dr. Lynch, who, by the way, will have a link to all the programming and his accolades, where he had been inside of ghost hunting, inside of everything paranormal. We'll have all the links inside the show notes. The greatest part is that all of that lives on, and it's all thanks to podcasting, which is really the largest moment here inside of the program.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that as a creator, it can be a little bit tough to wrap your head around, right? Because we talk a lot about building community and making investments and, producing something that makes a legacy that you're proud of. But it can be a little bit difficult, I think, to decouple yourself from that and say, it's possible, it may not happen, but it's possible that I could die and people could continue to find something valuable from this show for decades. And so I'll be the first to admit that coming to something late, it's the same as reading a book by a dead person. It's not the same as knowing the person and getting to walk with them, but it is a way that you can leave something behind that's super valuable. That's certainly been something that I've thought about from my shows, not usually from the, I don't want to call it morbid, but maybe the more final perspective of someday I won't be here to nurture this anymore. I won't be here to continue delivering this, but certainly I want to make sure that this is doing something right now that people will find valuable. I don't want to say anything disparaging about making money, because that's certainly not a problem. I don't mind making money. I have a job. I like to eat. But at the same time, that's one of the beautiful things, especially as an indie or as a hobby podcaster, you have a lot more freedom because you're not beholden necessarily to advertisers or to some other agenda, where you can truly make something that you're proud of, that for the people that it's for will be incredibly, incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Over the course of the last almost now 3 years, I've started working with people that are traditionally finishing out their stated and broadcasted careers, whatever their career choice has been. Most of them are finishing it out, and they're trying to come to grips with what's going to happen after I either retire or I just stop doing what I'm doing. And it's one of the best areas and platforms for those who create podcasts or produce podcasts or edit them or have any content creation talent of any kind. And why it's so valuable is exactly what we're talking about with Dr. Lynch. Dr. Lynch has an entire library of noteworthy programs, everything from Bigfoot to 9/11 to Adolf Hitler didn't die in Germany to just a giant landslide of, wait a minute, what did you say, topics that you may not agree with any of them. But if you're looking for some cogent thought that gives you, like I was talking about before, this giant plate of spaghetti and then shows you how the twisty turnies somehow become something that you can follow. Um, I've never met anybody that matched the doc's talent, and that talent and the resource management and the stories and the way that all of those things impacted their lives are why I continue to be a podcaster and a podcast producer for people of a variety of professions. And that's why that is what fuels me. I know that I am conjuring something for them or with them that's going to allow them to long outlive themselves. And I unlike you, I've known this since probably, I think maybe my first, maybe second year of podcasting, where when we started digging in deep with entertainment review over at Fox, and I kept remembering as we started visiting that, and then we started visiting these classic movies that I had these stories and memories from my deepest of friends from childhood, that I was uncasing a bunch of stuff that I really do want people to know about. But more importantly, I want people to know about it so that if and or when I am gone, they've still got something of that to listen to again. That's never been more clear for me than after both of my parents died in 2017 and 18, 6 months apart from each other. When 5 years later, I got a book out of the blue from one of my dad's shipmates that was a handwritten book from my dad. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if, it's great. I've got podcasts of my dad that are awesome. Fast Freddy's Castle of Common Sense. But what I didn't have really to date, I might have had maybe a couple of letters he and I wrote back and forth when I was in college. But what I never had was long form diary world thought in my dad's own handwriting. But now I do. And that was delivered this last year on Father's Day weekend. So that was, it's monumental. I've only gotten through about half of it so far because it's heavy. The family secrets aren't being trunked out or anything, but it's heavy thinking. And my dad and I had a really good, transparent relationship, but the freedom that he clearly had to provide things like what he's talking about in his own written hand is magical. It is a treasure. And that same treasure value, I absolutely attribute to those who podcast, especially, I think over the course of you and I now podcasting, I think it's coming up on a year and a half.
Yeah.
As I think back to you and I podcasting, I know that there's at least a dozen different stories that you and I have either shared from family or friends or business acquaintances that they hold that same true value, where the best way to describe things is to showcase the story and then tell you what you leached from it or what you learned from the people that you interacted with that maybe you didn't agree with them, or maybe you came away with a bad taste in your mouth from them. But the bottom line is that you learned something. And I always joke about it with people, but if you're watching the video presentation of this so far on YouTube, inside my studio on the wall, there's a microphone, and inside the microphone, there is a light bulb. And I casually tell people I am a light bulb moment hunter. I am a perpetual student of all things that I try to interact with. and that and the ongoing never ending storyline that becomes your podcast is why I podcast. No question.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it reminded me that this legacy that we're talking about, it's also not just about you as the host. If you have an interview show, and this has happened to me, you can be providing a legacy for someone who might not have recorded it themselves. I've had
No
at
question.
least one guest of my show who died, and I was
Mhm.
able to capture their story a couple times. There's a show that I've been thinking about that I just can't make the timing and the economics work. I would call it the octogenarian show, where you just
Mm.
talk to people who are over 80 and ask them questions like, what's different? What are your regrets? What do you wish you could tell your family? Because I think those conversations for families often don't happen until it's too late. And I also think, and this is partly because I'm getting older, this has never been my thing, but I find myself now thinking about the people that went before and how I'm disconnected from them. And is there something that I could do to not only connect myself, but provide that string for the people that come after me? Because not so much because I want to go back to a different time. That's not it at all. But those are
Mhm.
real people with real lives who lived a really different way than we do. And there's incredible value in what they've done. And so the ability to capture that, whether it's a one-time guest on your show, whether it's a co-host, whether it's a show dedicated to people that are over 80, I'm not like, I don't know, but that is incredibly valuable. Even if it doesn't seem like it at the time, even if no advertiser would ever pay you for that, somebody's going to hear that and it's going to transform their lives. I can tell you right now, because it's happened to me listening to other people's stories on my show, some of whom
Mhm.
aren't with us anymore. It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. There's several things that your commentary there reminds me of. And I think the first one is my original co-host, Brian. Brian had latched on to asking older people questions about their family in podcast form.
Mhm.
There wasn't a given thing or name or attribution to it then. There is now. There are several efforts right now that I can think of. There's a Facebook ad that I know I have seen where forgive me, I've forgotten the name of it, but it's essentially where it's a series of questions, and you go and you ask your favorite family member slash
Mhm.
someone that's older than you the questions, and they provide the answers. And now it's in a contained recorded box, and you can listen to it at your leisure. I know my daughter would instantly get something from that had we had something like that for, say, her grandmother. Well, she's got my dad's podcasts, but they're not answers to questions that are germane to her. His are kind of like life lessons about how not to be a dumbass. And it's not that he was talking to me while he was recording them, but there was enough inside the discussions of him recording them that I can kind of hear him saying, "Comma, Mike," at the end of every one of the episodes. And that's the first thing it made me think of. The second thing it made me think of is something called I just saw it on Facebook. It's called the Knockbox, and it's Knockbox, Knockbox,
Hmm.
and it's the next of kin box. It's the
Oh,
box where everything goes sideways, and you need to have what essentially is a marching list order of what needs to be done, who needs to be talked to, and how it will all shake out when either you or someone close to you passes. And I think that's also treasure, because as you stated, not only do we not think about it, I think in many cases we don't want to think about it, which again
yeah.
is another reason why we're doing this episode. This is not the whole "hey man, go get your shit in order to get before you die" episode. But it's something close to it. Most importantly, it's to remember that when you are podcasting, for both good and bad, what you say continues to exist.
Yeah.
It's why very often I do not participate in the off the cuff hardy har. Let's sit down in front of four microphones and yak as bros. There's things I would tell very close friends of mine that I know that I would never want to get out to anybody, or ways
Hmm.
I would deliver something that I know I just don't want to be part of the public lexicon for other folks. And again, it's where this kind of program, I want you to think about what you're leaving every time that you hit the record button, but most importantly, after you're done hitting the record button and when you publish your program. Uh, there is lots and lots of value to it. The problem is that it can either be a value or it can be a very, very heavy burden that you then have to start spelunking against if it's something that will instantly drag you down. There's a value to spontaneity, but there's also a value to, I don't want to say a filter, but I do want to, it's time to read the room.
Well,
and
there's appropriateness, right? Not everything should be shared with everyone.
Yeah. And there's several large projects that are now, especially in the St. Louis area, that are now expansive projects that I did not submit the finished bid to them because again, it's the whole couple of guys sitting in front of microphones yakking for yacking's purpose. And not only do I not have any interest in listening to that, the production of that doesn't sound like it's a whole lot of fun to me other than some recording time in a studio. And again, that's not my bailiwick. My bailiwick is to help people create something that harnesses their perspectives, their skill sets, but more importantly, their legacy that can live on way past when they're gone. What else did I want to lay on to here? Again, to go back to what we were talking about originally, the doc. Dr. Lynch was a singular personality. He was an immovable force in paranormal research and discussion, and the want for there to be a portal to the knowledge that he was finding so that people would not only understand it, but more importantly, the people that did not believe him, they would have at least one light bulb moment where they go, It's not that he was trying to coax everybody into agreeing with him about everything. That was never the piece that he fostered. And I really appreciated that. If you've ever talked to somebody that's trying to coax you into understanding, and now you must understand because I've explained it about any conspiracy ever, you know how frustrating that can be, especially as a listener when you don't have any feedback at all. And he never did that. He always provided beams of light that you could look at and read and understand and glean the pieces of shine that you wanted from. But he never grabbed those and beat you over the head with them. And I'm just so fortunate that I had a hand in that, being his producer and then his co-host for those programs, because again, it's magical. As we started with the front end, all hosts die, but your program lives on. What else you got, Brian?
That's it, man. I think I'm about to be done with it.
Okay. And that's where we ask you guys, what do you think of all this? This is a very heavy-hitting topic, and I've never been afraid of talking about death, mostly because it's the end of the paragraph, right? It's something that we all have to work towards. It's not an end game at all, frankly, especially for those of us who are in content creation or podcasting, because what we are talking about now, and I look forward to it being many, many decades beyond now. But when I'm gone, this program lives on. And so we're wondering what you think. Go over to our website over at podcastgauntlet.com, click on the contact button, fill out the quick web form, and tell us what you think about all this grand legacy that we're fashioning in a time before you will die, as your program will live on. Until next time, keep on coming back to Brian and I as we throw down, discuss, rise, and shine in podcasting during the Podcast Gauntlet. See you next time.